Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Phoenix Snap webinar with our partners at Veeam. Today, we are going to talk about how you can ensure your business continuity as a top priority in 2023. My name is William Bell, Executive Vice President of Products at Phoenix Snap, and today I am joined by Michael Deemer, Inside Systems Engineer at Veeam. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks for having me here today, William.
Awesome. All right. So as we jump in to all this content, I think it behooves us to try to get a poll question going to start. We're gonna make it nice and simple. What kind of outages did you guys experience last year? What does that look like? Maybe that'll help us get an idea of what we're dealing with in terms of how much you need a business continuity and disaster recovery plan, and kind of work the content from there. All right, we'll make sure we get 50. There we go. All right, so doesn't look like too many people saw anything that was crazy. Looks like couple days, couple hours, these types of things. And what from a cause perspective, what did that look like for you? What were you dealing with? Look, there's no throwing shade here, right? Everybody that we work with is dealing with some of this at some point. So this is a typical list of things that we see. Most of the time, to be fair, it's a hardware or software failure or some type of human error that causes a hardware or software failure. And we are obviously seeing lots of cyber attacks, increasingly national disasters, especially if you're located in the Gulf Coast region, Florida, and the Atlantic East. So lots going on there. And look, we said the top respondent in our poll was human error, and as you can see, we have from our friends at Veeam, a little bit of the Uptime Institute and the ConnectWise team. They've come up with these great statistics talking about how much human error plays a role in people having major business outages, and increasingly as a void is created of skill sets and overwork in businesses and a lack of general competency on the technical debt that you've amassed, we're seeing it more, right? It continues to be a big part of everyone's lives. And I think that if you marry that up with stretched budgets and you're in a position where you have aging infrastructure that's driving your expected renewal cycles to be much increased from the past, you're going to deal with even more of that type of thing, and you're going to see outages from server infrastructure, storage infrastructure that can damage your business. And then still we see people, malicious actors, 99% of the time it's some type of drive-by ransomware, people just spraying and praying the attackers, and then they get a fish on the hook and they reel it in, right? And that results in all the things that you guys are aware of, the ransomwares and the extortionware and things like that. So I think that especially for mid-sized and small businesses, it can be very, very challenging. And the data doesn't lie, right? I think that ultimately when you look at the cost of the outages that you observe, the more reliant that companies become on technical infrastructure, the larger those losses total when you get to dealing with them and accounting for them, right? When you truly dig in, you say, okay, well, yeah, my CRM was offline for X period of time, or my ERP system, planning and logistics system was down for Y period of time. Maybe it cost me $25,000 in sales, but what's the lifetime value of that customer? Or, what's my brand reputation when, 20,000 people came to my website and it was offline, right? In some capacity. And I think that that's what we're starting to be much more keenly aware of as we try to determine what's impacting the bottom lines today, right? We're going to see more of that, right? As budgets are constricted, as we enter this cycle, whatever it is a recession, temporary downturn that lasts a while, whatever you want to call it, people are going to be looking at that totality or the causes of their gaps in profitability. And if outages are making up a percentage of that, right, that's significant. It can definitely weigh into the decision making of the board or people in charge of the company. And as we look to understand what the impact can be from the ransomware type of activities, it can often be not an astronomical figure, but very substantially damaging from a cash flow perspective, right? You may work for a small business that generates $10 million a year in revenue, but ultimately just finding $250,000 tomorrow to wire in hours to send Bitcoin to someone or wire someone, which we don't recommend in general. The FBI doesn't recommend it either. But if that's the decision you're making, that can put a significant damage into your cash flow statement. So ultimately, everything that we're talking about, everything that you do as a technical person working with organizations, or if you're the owner of these organizations, it all kind of comes back to some type of, line item on a balance sheet, right? And how that looks. What are you spending to protect against the failure? And I think that that's kind of where we plan to spend the most of our time today. So as we try to understand where CIOs are seeing the biggest challenges around accomplishing the things that I've talked about so far, I think that these are really quality places or trends or challenges that CIOs are looking at and dealing with every single day. And I mentioned that ransomware as a service, that kind of spray and pray. People, with any amounts of funds that have a criminal mindset can use those funds to generate more funds, right? So you got $20,000, you can attack 15,000 people, you can get $250,000 in ransomware payments. It's a pretty simplistic methodology, and it doesn't take any technical complexity today, right? You can pay someone to do it for you, essentially. All you have to have is money and a willingness to break the law. And so it's amplifying the frequency of these types of attacks. As you look at the way that people have thought traditionally about prevention of security breaches or outages, and or recovery from them, exclusively recovery side of this angle, increasingly we're finding it's just not enough. It's purely a measure of resiliency, and investing in resiliency can be a very, very important place as you plan your next 10 years of technical enablement, so that you can build highly available applications that don't so much require or rely on highly available infrastructure. And building that immutability into your platform so that you can suffer pretty much any type of disruption from a ransomware perspective or something like that, and ensure that you have clean copies of your data. If you look at that last piece we talked about, finding the talent to make your life better, right, as a business owner or technical decision maker, and keeping them employed and giving them what they need to help you tackle the challenges that we're talking about and manage the technical enablement through those challenges is becoming, I mean, I would say, you're probably on this, route to where that might be the most important challenge that you face as a company, not just for security and BCP perspectives, but also for business competitiveness perspectives. Go ahead. So what do? Let's go to the meat and potatoes, right? I'm gonna lay out this plan for you, and then my friend Mike's gonna talk about how Veeam has worked truly hard to make a comprehensive approach at this. But it all starts with understanding what you have. Performing that risk and business impact analysis is of the utmost priority. Even if you ultimately do nothing about it, the data it can provide you can be very valuable. And a lot of times what we find is it can bring to light incongruencies between owner priority or board priority and technical decision makers priority, or what they think is important. And in a lot of organizations that we talk to, the technical decision maker can arrive at very grandiose protection plans and associated budgets based on their understanding of what's most important to the business. And when they communicate this breakdown to the business, here's my app, here's the level of criticality we place on it, here's what we think we can have from we can protect ourselves from in terms of single loss expectancy and how important it is to that business. You may find that the business owner or board doesn't share your enthusiasm for those types of things. I mean, we found it ourselves over the year. We think that XYZ thing is critical, and ultimately we get to the end and we say, okay, well, yeah, it's really important, but is it worth spending X, Y dollars on? And the answer can sometimes be no. Trying to develop that education and training program internally, which is a requirement of many of the compliance frameworks out there anyway, so you're probably doing it if you have any sort of compliance initiatives to undergo. Ultimately, you got to get your people up to speed. They need to know how to manage the things that you're protecting, and how to help you do number 3. Build that disaster recovery plan. If you're not the technical decision maker or you're not the engineer on this call, and you are the business owner or the executive in charge of these operations, it can be very difficult to build these BCP-DR plans and enact upon them. And my friends at Veeam have done an amazing job of making that easy. But ultimately, you have to have the right people, and you have to prepare ahead of time in order to make it successful. And then lastly, if you're not testing your DR, your backup plans, it's just an absolute, it's all worthless. It truly is all worthless. Everything you ever did can be undone in a flash because you didn't bother to test and continuously update the plan that you've built. So we're going to jump to the next slide. And then as you look at why people are trying to find technical solutions, the answers can be pretty clear. And as you look at protection of data, when you dig deep, some type of off-site copy or DR as a service for your most critical environments is truly the most efficient way to implement these types of protections. It's not the only way, right? Like, if you have the ability, the capability, the time, the budget, you can still build your own DR infrastructure. But ultimately, I would challenge that that's not a capital efficient thing to do. It's not an operationally efficient thing to do, and could truly be a waste. You're paying for something that, if you never use, it will just have cost you money, forever, right? For no utility whatsoever. And ultimately, you have an opportunity with the as a service products in the market to share in the cost of that effort, like you would do for insurance, right? Like, I find it comical to some extent that IT leaders, don't have, a third car in their driveway just in case their car breaks down, but they're willing to duplicate all their infrastructure, and have it ready at the click of a button when there's some type of outage. It's never really made sense to me. But that said, I think that even when I was doing it, right, even when I was running these systems myself, it didn't ever really make a lot of sense to allocate that budget. And you tried really hard to be as efficient as you think you can be, right? That's using your previous generation equipment, whether you're not quite sure it could actually take your application load anymore or not. It's using the same resources that you use for production for DR in terms of management and upkeep, but ultimately it ends up being just a cost hole that you never crawl yourself out of. Thinking with that, my friends at Veeam are going to talk through some of the technical enablement that they've done around VCP DR, and then I'm going to come back at the end. We're going to talk about how we've joined forces to make some of these solutions easy to consume for the people on the call. All right, take it away, Mike.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that warm welcome there, William. And one thing, guys, I just want to say is William did a bunch of good information there. That business continuity roadmap is something that I would absolutely take away. There's a lot of good stuff here, but there is a lot of key things that you can take away and implement this into your daily lives, and something that you should be absolutely exploring. And with that being said, I'm going to show you how Veeam backup and replication can really help with the disaster recovery side of the house here. And the very first thing I really want to talk about is 3-2-1, and then I'll get into 3-2-1-0. Now, one of the very first things I want to say is if you guys aren't adhering to this rule, I would really highly advised to take some type of screenshot and not necessarily memorize this, but making sure that you understand it at an architectural level and at a high level. Now, this rule is not a rule that me and Phoenix Snap came up with together. This is a backup strategy that has been across the board for everybody. Now, I would also like to say, if you guys aren't doing this, or you're with another particular provider that isn't even talking about this, do your due diligence, do your homework, and make sure that you go to somebody that understands that disaster recovery orchestration and disaster recovery is at the highest level, and making sure that your data is protected. Now, moving back to 3-2-1 here. So with 3-2-1, this is basically how we make sure and ensure that the data is protected and able to be restored at the end of the day, if and when we need to call upon it. Now, that 3 really stands for 3 different copies of your data. In this particular instance, it's going to be 3 VBKs. Now, when we're talking about 3 VBKs in the Veeam world, that's 3 active fulls, right? Now, that 2 really indicates 2 different forms of media, right? So we could have like SSD and NVMe. That could be one type of media set, so that's like fast class disk. And then we could have another type of media set, kind of like tape. So we're not putting all of our eggs into the same basket, hoping and praying that nothing ever happens, right? We're really making sure that we're making that delineage right from the get-go, and we're setting us up for success down the road. Now, this next one is huge, having one offsite. This is exactly where William comes into play, right? Phoenix Snap, making sure that we have a data center, something that we can target that's outside of our production scope, that isn't technically our infrastructure. So even if something gets bled, right? So credentials get leaked, a malicious insider, malicious actor, they're still not going to be able to get that one that's offsite. And then once you pair all those together, the biggest thing is 0 errors after Veeam backup and recovery verification. And I think William said it on the business continuity roadmap, right? Is testing everything is very, very important. And just like he said, if you don't test, everything can go like a blink of an eye down the wrong type of hole that you just do not want to go back and dig up, right? So making sure that we really have that in place. Now here on my next slide, I'm gonna really kind of show you what happens when ransomware hits. So I know this slide's a little busy, so I'm gonna kind of explain it to you. So minus the red on the virtual machines there, let's start on the left-hand side. So where that hypervisor is. All right, so that hypervisor could be VMware, could be Nutanix, could be Hyper-V. And then on top of that, we have our production virtual machines. This could be a domain controller, this could be SQL, this could be just applications, files, and data, things like that. Below the hypervisor, we have our storage arrays. Could be a Pure, could be Nimble, NetApp, Dell, HPE. Really kind of doesn't matter too much on the storage front, but we do have a lot of different options. Now moving a little bit into the middle there where that Veeam box is, that is truly our Veeam backup and replication server. That is the brains of the operation, doing any type of orchestration, doing any type of backups, moving the data to offsite, testing the data, right? And if we follow that line, we have a couple different repositories. We have a regular typical repository with an HPE or a Dell or data domain. Then we have an offline tape library. And then at the very bottom there, that green arrow is actually going to an on-demand sandbox. Now that sandbox is a completely isolated environment. It can be built one-to-one to your production environment. And this is going to make sure that we can really know that we have a good copy. So what happens when ransomware hits? Now that we understand kind of the architecture that's on the slide, hey, what happens when my production virtual machines have that red lock on them? Well, the very first thing that you're going to notice is you're not going to have access. All your data is not going to be readable. You're probably going to get some type of message on either your server, or if it's like O365, you get an email. And it's basically going to say something to the gist of this. Hey, you've been encrypted, and we would like payment to get your data back, so that way you can basically continue on with your day, right? They're going to ask for this in cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, you name it, they're going to use some type of cryptocurrency. Usually it's a smaller name, and then it'll transfer that into like a bigger, like a Bitcoin or something like that. But how do we know that we have a good copy, right? So now that production is completely not something that we can use, that offline tape libraries, of course, we could restore from there, but we really don't know if maybe that ransomware has been sitting in the environment for a while. And we can't just go back to the regular repository because it's all on premise, right? So one other thing I really want to draw our eyes to is we're making sure that we're actually using modern storage snapshots. So instead of taking like a nightly backup, we're taking it every hour, which absolutely is going to be very, very beneficial because of the granularity that we get from that. Now, moving back to that sandbox is really where we're going to know that we have a good copy. Now, how are we going to know we have a good copy? This is going to be a heartbeat test, a ping test, and an application test. And then we actually leave it open. So if you want to go in there and validate, you want to go in there and have an auditor go in and make sure that you have scrubbed every single piece of that data, I would highly advise do that, making sure with 100% certainty that everything has been done. Now, the other big thing that the sandbox can do is actually do an AV scan. As long as you use one of our compliant AV softwares, you can actually have your AV look for signatures in the backup as well when that actually kicks off. So here on my next slide, I'm going to show you how we actually recover from storage snapshots, which is typically a little different than what most people do. So if you look at that red line up at the very top, if you see unprotected, right? And then that's very typical where people take a nightly backup. So they're not getting a backup until every night at 8 p.m. It takes a little while, it does its thing, and then it lands, right? Now, when we actually leverage modern storage snapshots, we are not just confined to this specific time of the hour. We can actually go in there and say every hour on the hour, I want to take a snap. One, that's really nice for making sure that we're really quiescing the database and everything is application consistent. And there's a lot of a multitude of other things that really kind of comes into this. But the biggest one is making sure that you have that granular options to roll back 1 hour. 1, 2, 3 hours, whatever that may be when you're doing your snapshots. Comparatively, if you just did a typical backup and you needed to restore at like 12 p.m., Well, we have no data until the last time at 8 p.m. So just something to kind of keep in mind there. Modern storage snapshots is absolutely something that can be enabled as long as there is the APIs for that. Now, the other big thing I want to talk about is our Explorer series here. You see it at the bottom. This is just a few of the Explorer series. Now, and we have some for Exchange, we have some for Oracle, and we have some for SQL, SharePoint, Active Directory, and a slew more. But really, what do these do? At a very high level, these Veeam Explorers are built for enabling restores for these specific items. For instance, SQL, you need to go in there and do a table. You need to go in there and do a recovery. These are built exactly for that, making sure that it's very easy to use and everybody can get back to trying to deal with that fire, but we can make sure that we're dealing with it the quickest and the most efficient way possible from that particular side. Now, actually, what I want to actually do next is actually show you that slide that was here on our next slide. I'll show you kind of what I talked about a little bit earlier, but this is going to be a little bit different. So this is time to restore, right? So I want to show you the multitude of options that we truly have, right? So we could restore from a storage snapshot, just like I was saying before. We can roll back hourly, right? Or every 30 minutes, it kind of depends on how you want to roll with that. Now, you could also do from a secure backup target, right? So what is a secure backup target? Very good question. So a secure backup target is something that is potentially immutable on the back end, making sure that is offline, things like that. That also moves me into tape. So we could also restore from an offline tape library and actually do it from there. And my true favorite is restoring from cloud, just because it's the most easy, I think, in my 2 cents there. So this is where we tap on Phoenix Snap. We say, hey, we've been using you guys as a cloud target. I just need to have these 1, 2, 3 backups backup, maybe these couple of virtual machines. Here's a couple SQL, and all that's going to be orchestrated, and we're going to be able to pull that directly down from the public or the Cloud Connect side of Phoenix Snap. So a lot of good stuff there for making sure that even if a virtual machine is affected, we have a whole slew of different options here. And you can see all the green arrows, right? We have a whole bunch of options from restoring on that particular side. Now, here on my next slide is actually going to know how are we protected. Now, we know how to restore. We know that we have granular snapshots. We know we have an Explorer series to do everything, but we need to know that we're validating that everything is good. So maybe we need to do a backup assessment. Maybe we need to have ransomware alerts or backup reports, or maybe even Sure Backup. With Sure Backup, again, is making sure that it's isolated, it's tested, ping test, heartbeat test, all that kind of good stuff. And there's a lot more of those type of reports, and that all kind of leans back to Veeam 1. Veeam 1 is this big aggregation side, and it's monitoring and analytics at a very high level. You need to know data store latency. You need to know maybe a Visio diagram. I can't tell you the amount of times I've installed Veeam 1 just to have a Visio diagram of that complete environment be built on the fly, instead of an engineer sitting out let's just say on the low end 30 minutes to 2 hours, depending on complexity, to really kind of get that together. And it's going to show all the different types of intricacies that really come along with that. And at the end of the day, guys, Veeam 1 is going to find out if you have virtual machines that are not being backed up. Maybe you have virtual machines that have way too many cores and way too much RAM allocated and they're not being used, but maybe on this other virtual machine in the other data center, it's really taking a pounding. It doesn't have that much amount of cores. It doesn't have that much amount of RAM. These are the type of reports that you can actually gather from a Veeam 1 aggregate there. So moving more into the infrastructure side, I'm going to be going into more of the Hardened Linux repository. Now, some of you go, hey, I've never heard of that. Maybe some of you guys know what a Hardened Linux repository is. So for those that don't, this is a Linux box that we can use kind of like a NAS. This is going to be sitting on-prem. Now, is it a NAS? No, it is not. This is truly a Linux box, maybe running Ubuntu, Red Hat, or Debian. One of those distros, we have a whole bunch that we're compatible with. And basically what we do is making sure that we have an immutable target, and an immutable target is something that's malware proof, ransomware proof, and malicious insider proof that sits on premises. So that way, even if something happens, we have a logistical place to go, and we know that that backup hasn't been touched. Now, let's actually go here on my next slide and actually show you a little more what's underneath the skin here. Now, what's really cool is this can also, this is basically a malware safe repository, right? So you can also use this with insider protection. Insider protection is basically a way that the MSP or Phoenix Snap is enabled them to be a local repository with you guys. Now, what does this really do at the end of the day, right? So there's two things that it's going to do. It's going to deny, but ultimately how we make sure that we're denying or approving acts is based on this immutable flag. This immutable flag is going to be set in the backup policy. Once this immutable flag is set, you see that little I next to those backups, you're going to know that that backup has now been blocked, right? It has an immutable flag on it. And let's just say you have a 14-day retention period. Cool. So nothing can happen to that data within that 14 days. Now, what's going to happen to that data after 14 days? Well, the new last 14 days of the most current backup gets now implemented into the immutable side, and then you can always restore. So that's always a big question that I get is, hey, if it's immutable, can I restore it? Yeah, absolutely. You can always restore that data. Now, what is it going to do though once we have that immutable flag on it, which is also going to deny the deletion of backup? So let's just say, you know, a malicious insider or a rogue admin got in there, so they have the creds, right? And they go in there and they want to delete everything. Well, it's really going to tell them to kick rocks and pound sand, and not allow them to actually delete any of that kind of backups on the back end. Now, how do we do that? Here on my next slide, I'm going to talk about how we use like a non-root account. So if there is some Linux admins out there, you guys definitely know and understand the topology of how, you know, access works around the Linux side. So root, in a general sense, is basically like top-level domain credentials in Windows. So basically, they have administration rights to everything. We use a non-root account. If you notice there to the right-hand side where it has that little green triangle where it says single-use only credentials. And we actually use single-use only credentials, and then we burn the bridge back outbound. So we only use them once. And then at the very bottom there, if you draw your eyes to it, that's actually how we make a immutable backup, right? So we just check a box. We say the number of days that you want it to be immutable for, and that's it. It's very simple from the UI perspective. There's a lot that actually goes into the back end for the Linux side and making sure everything's immutable, but that is how we actually do that. Now, we also use XFS for on the Linux side to leverage block cloning. So this is going to help us space savings and really making sure that we can get as much amount of storage out of those particular arrays that we possibly can, because with block cloning, it's very similar to like an REFS repository on Windows. So it's using the best of the best to try to really dedupe, compress, and smuff as much as we possibly can in there with a whole bunch of cool technology on the back end to make sure that works. Cool deal. So moving here a little bit further, I want to talk about basically archive tier. But before I get to archive tier, I need to break down what performance tier is, capacity tier, and then I'll move into archive tier. Now, this is in a very general sense, if you guys are used to Veeam or used to Veeam's architecture at any form and fashion, this is actually SOBR, S-O-B-R. Now, the performance tier in this particular case is going to be spinning disks. So this could be SSD, NVMe, Fiber Channel, iSCSI, a NAS, right? Really doesn't matter there. That's the performance tier. So that's the very first thing that we land in. And then capacity tier comes into play, right? So capacity tier. So this is object storage. So if you wanted to push up to Amazon or you wanted to push up to Blob, you can absolutely do so. So this is just going to more of like a hot object storage vendor. but there's also a lot of times needing to have more of a like a Glacier involved or a storage archival with Blob, right? Now, let's also just pretend that you're using Amazon. When you're using the archive tier, you can only use Amazon Glacier. You can't use Amazon in the capacity tier and then use like Blob archive storage. Just something that we can't do as today. I do feel like that will be changing in the future, but as of today, that's how it sits. Same thing for Microsoft. If you're using Microsoft as a capacity tier, you can't use Amazon Glacier as the cold tier. So I'm not going to spend too much time on there, but really just know that the cold tier is very cheap and deep. And this is where you can get like cost optimization, and then you can also have some space savings. And really the biggest thing is this is for people that need to keep long amounts of data. Maybe you have HIPAA compliancy, you have some type of very complex any one of those big verticals where you say, hey, I'm in the banking system and I have to keep all of my records for 20 years. This is something where we really try to push to more of like a cold storage, hoping and praying we really never have to go back there. But that is a very good point. Awesome. So the next big one I really want to talk about is continuous data protection. A lot of people love to hear this. This is CDP, or basically how really what I want to round this up to is a resilient way for critical workloads that we have basically a near zero recovery point objective. So that way we're really minimizing the amount of data loss and the data recovery to the last point in time state. So we're really making sure that maybe we're backing up every 1 minute or every just as soon as we possibly can. So right after the next. This would be good for big high transactional servers, right? Now, I'm going to get a little nerdy here on my next slide, so bear with me. I'm going to be kind of going over like the CDP overview. So at the very, very top, I want to break down how this all works. So the CDP coordinator, that guy in the very middle, basically what does he do and what is his job? So he, at the end of the day, is pretty much like the top level manager. He runs everything, right? Now he communicates with like vCenter. He also assigns like replica tasks. So he does a lot of that, the orchestration side, right? So really the top level manager there. Now moving a little bit down, we're going to go to the source filter. The source filter, basically what this does is he's going to run on EXXI, and he's going to intercept IO requests, right? He's going to do filtering for instances per vDisks. So just something else to note. Again, guys, I know this is kind of getting a little nerdy, but that is kind of what that looks like. Now, moving on to the other one, which is source daemon. This one is kind of acts as like the admin of all that host in communication with the CDP coordinator, the source proxy, the filter. He relies really heavily on the proxy and traffic routes. To basically be like the coordinator of that, kind of like if you want to think of it like a traffic cop in a way. So that's kind of what he's doing. He's making sure everything's going off to plan, everything's making sure that it hits the right filter, making sure that everything goes down the right route, so that way it gets to the ending target in the right form and fashion. All right, moving down here just a little bit longer is going to be the expanded instant recovery side. Now, on the extended instant recovery side, this is where we can really start to making sure that we can do instant VM recoveries. So if you need something quick, you need something right now, your back's up against the wall, I have this C drive of my domain controller that just went down and I need it back up and running. Guess what? That's exactly what instant VM recovery can do. It makes sure that we can get down to those ultra low RTOs, ensuring that we get, whatever that particular issue is at the time, get it back up and going in a matter of minutes, if not shorter. All right, so here on my last slide, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And that's really instant VM recovery, right? We're making sure that if we do have any types of challenging RTO goals, that instant recovery action can absolutely help with like seamless recovery over many, many types of workloads here, regardless of really of the workload itself. We can do seamless recovery of SQL and Oracle and NAS, a lot of good stuff here. And this really comes into play, especially when we're talking about the DR side, having the flexibility to instant recovery to any of the Veeam backup and replication side, whether it's Hyper-V or VMware or Nutanix. It's really making sure that we're very portable and easy to access across the board. Now, I do want to say thank you for letting me spiel, especially more on the technical side there. And at this time, I'm going to pass it back over to one of our Platinum VCSP partners, William, and he'll be able to take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. Okay. And so, I think that the most valuable way to find great solutions for objectives that you have in your business is through other people vouching for you, right? And Gartner has recognized Phoenix Snap as a representative vendor, which means in the market guides, there's 10 vendors that they document as being your top tier providers for this type of service. They compare and contrast our services versus our competitors. And I think it's super valuable if you have a Gartner subscription to go check that out. But just at a minimum, you don't get on the list unless you've been doing it for a while and you have a competency around it. So let's talk about what that looks like with Veeam and Phoenix Snap today. So there are two main categories of Veeam DR and backup solutions that we support today. We have our Cloud Connect backup solution that we call Cloud Backup for Veeam, and that solution will allow you to just get that highly protected third copy offsite with optional insider protection and immutability configured. And then we have our DR as a service solution, which leverages replication. And very soon, the CDP technology that Michael talked about will be available to have for us as DR as a service providers for you to leverage towards us. And that is going to make a really powerful suite of capabilities around protecting your Veeam-based data protection data, right? And really making sure that A, you have quick recovery, B, that recovery is exactly what you expect, and that there are no hiccups in your environment. Next. So the way that works, both those solutions, it's paying for what you use. It's based on the data stored for backup. So it's just how much data you need to put in a repository. So you pay for the fixed repository size. And then on the DR side, it's how many VMs you have and how much data you're replicating to us from your live environment. That's it. Makes it super simple for us to quote, makes it super simple for you to understand, makes it easy for you to implement and knowing exactly what you need for your environment. We wrap that with 24/7 support. You can call us, we'll help you directly. It's not just send us an email, we'll get back to you. There's no extra charge for that. We really specialize in infrastructure. That's our key thing in the market. If you go talk to folks in the Veeam community, people that work at Veeam, they'll tell you two things about Phoenix Snap: infrastructure fanatics, security fanatics, right? Those are the two things that we are focused on every single day. I think that although we've put a lot of effort into it, if you're looking for whiz-bang tools and all kinds of crazy features, there are probably great providers out there that have that. For us, it's about accomplishing the mission, being efficient, and doing it very securely, cost effectively. Those are the things that we're focused on every single day. And then having choice, being able to put that data in any of our 6 globally distributed locations around available, and that will get you that ability to put the data where you need to, or keep it local in a region if you need to do that. And then if you look at the broader ecosystem, we use Veeam everywhere, right? So it's not just for that kind of technical disaster recovery or offsite backup. We also, for our hosted VMware solutions where we're providing the VMware as a service, we back up all that data with Veeam. It's not optional. We back it up no matter what. And it comes in the packages of Data Security Cloud pre-configured for you, as well as a slew of protection capabilities around the Office 365 suite, the Microsoft 365 suite now, I think. And that includes SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, the whole shebang. And we take care of all those backups for you. You make us a credential, We start the backup, we store the backup, we give you access to do self-service restores. Super easy, super simple. And all those solutions are being wrapped with the Veeam Service Provider Console that's going to allow you in the future to make those easy restorations all from one place. I think that we're coming to the end. Yeah, this is our eyeball slide if you like to look at where we have locations. As I mentioned, Veeam's only available in 6 of these. It is Phoenix, Atlanta, Ashburn, Amsterdam, Belgrade, and Singapore. So still a lot of geographic coverage, but those are the places that we offer Veeam solutions. Next slide. Yes, all right. So for everybody on the call, we're currently running promotion, 20% off our Veeam Cloud Connect prices, which are already awesome to begin with. That will include the insider protection bundle. So if you go with the insider protection on the Veeam Cloud Connect, basically it gets you the insider protection at the Veeam Cloud Connect price. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're doing. It's getting you a little extra protection. It costs us a little bit more to deliver because we have to keep more data around. And so ultimately, the amount of data you're placing or consuming, or you're allowed to place or consume on our systems is higher, and it happens at essentially the same price point that you have for Cloud Connect backup alone. So that's really valuable, easy to contact sales. And then, yeah, last poll question, we'll wrap this thing up. If you want to talk to somebody, even on a technical side, if you just say, hey, look, we're not really buying yet, but let's talk about what we could do if we wanted to. We are happy to have that conversation with your teams. And we really want to thank you guys for jumping out, coming to our webinars and listening to what we have to say. We have had some questions, so I know we're going to dive into that as well. So Boyana, whenever you want to jump over to questions, I will run through the list here and see if anything is worth talking about out loud. Okay, perfect. All right. So Mike, does insider protection help you recover all your data after a breach? Can you set it up? Can you set it up for partial backups, or is it by a backup job, or how's it configured?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So insider protection is going to be pretty much set up as a standard, and that's going to cover all of your backup jobs. Now, you could potentially say get really selective, but majority of the time it's just everything.
Got it. Okay, great. Yeah, so I guess I kind of answered that. One of the other people asked, like, does your insider protection consume backup quota? The answer to that is no. You can't tell the difference as you're consuming Cloud Connect backup from us, or if you have insider protection or no insider protection. But as I mentioned, essentially what it's doing is like creating a recycle bin of data. So even when you go in and you delete things from your backup jobs, or you delete old data, old backups, we're still holding on to some just in case a malicious administrator had just went and clicked or right-click delete all the jobs, right? We'll still have it. So it's eating up more storage on our side to deliver, and that is why we charge more for it. Although if you take advantage of the promo, you can save there. That is why we typically charge more for it, so that customers have an extra peace of mind. But no, it doesn't change the way the backup quota looks on your side. It's, if you're used to getting 10 terabytes without data, without insider protection, you don't need to increase that to like 15 terabytes because you need insider protection. Who should I lean on to build our BCP plans? I think ultimately, I find that it takes a village. In my personal experience in multiple organizations, as a security and information security leader, I can tell you that our compliance and internal audit teams usually took the lead on this. I've seen it orchestrated by the technology teams, It's generally whoever the board or the ownership charges to do it that ends up taking it. But everyone's involved. Office of the CTO, HR, legal, support, accounting, they all have a stake in the outcome of this disaster recovery and business continuity process, right? Everybody has a stake, whether they think they do or not, right? Everyone has at least one system that they think is critical to their operational efficiency. And you as a technical leader, being able to understand what some of those often nascent to you systems look like can be super important, right? Like, I'll give you a good example. If you have an internal learning module system, training system, and you have a compliance that requires you to do X amount of training in X Y amount of time, you have to do new hire training within 20 days. You have to do secure information security and awareness training, and you have to accomplish that once a year, and that system's not available in the time that you have that scheduled, especially if you wait till the last minute. These are like really nascent things that could end up being very important to you from a compliance perspective. We do find a lot of times as well that just, IT teams don't actually know what systems are super critical to the business, like super critical to the business, because, they don't really understand the business process, and essentially something that is, just crazy important can cost you a lot. And I can think of an interesting example of that. We had a credit card processor customer that used a geolocational database for fraud scrubbing, and that system they used went offline for like 2.5 days. And A, it broke their code. B, once they got kind of everything bypassed, it was off. So they had kind of inferior fraud scrubbing techniques that led to excess chargebacks, that led to just fraudulent transactions. I mean, there's a lot of outcomes. It's just a very like weird, like, oh, this geolocational provider that some developer somewhere chose to use as a library in their application, and you don't even know that dependency. I'm not even saying that a BIA would actually uncover that dependency, but that is the type of thing that happens in technology, and the less of them that you can have happen to you, the more successful you're going to be as a technology leader, implementer, and or decision maker executive. So with that, I want to thank everyone for taking their time, sticking around, listening to what we have to say. I hope it was valuable. Mike, thanks so much again, man, for coming out and talking to us about Veeams, all the coolness of the Veeams. And,
yeah, well, thanks for having me, William. I really do appreciate it.
Of course. And we will be back in your inbox soon, I'm sure, talking about something else different, cool. And I hope to see you on the next one. Goodbye.
Bye, guys.